Okay, so we are live here at the Filipino Homes office. Okay, so I would like to greet each and everyone, to all Filipino Homes members, agents, brokers, consultants, appraisers. So good morning, Filipino Homes. Welcome to another online learning brought to you by our new program called FIRE. Okay, so Filipino Homes Institute of Real Estate. So our topic for today is the most interesting, the most important topic in the real estate category of selling. Okay, so success in real estate brokerage. So allow me to introduce our speaker. Our speaker for today is a licensed broker since 2011. So remember the relationship we had with Filipino Homes. Okay, so but she is seriously practicing, starting her profession at the year 2014. So until today, in fact, she is now full time selling, doing brokerage selling, and I'm so happy she's one of the top performer in brokerage selling with Filipino Homes. Okay, so she is a psychology practitioner teaching in counseling psychology once a week at Rogationes Seminary, Cebu since 2001 up to the present. She is a volunteer counselor since 2010 up to present. And allow me to welcome everyone, one of the top brokerage queen in the Philippines. Can we please give a round of applause? Mariquita Kets Boligol, licensed real estate broker of Filipino Homes. Hello, Kets. Good morning.
Good morning, Bossing. Thank you so much for that very generous introduction. And I'm very happy to join all of you here. And thank you so much also for the invite, for
Yes,
allowing me here.
we're so
So,
privileged to have you, Boss Kids, and I actually ako excited. I'm so excited to listen to your presentation now and the rest of Filipino Homes. You know how many attendees we have now? 484, almost 500 attendees, and they are so excited to hear you. In fact, this is the first time they have seen you, the queen of brokerage of Filipino Homes.
oh my God, what a label.
Yeah. So
Okay.
take it away, Boss.
Yeah, so welcome mga bossing from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. I understand we are not, how do you call that, in the normal situation, but we are in the new normal. But the spirit is still normal. The drive is still normal, right? So here I'm with you as a sharer, not necessarily as an expert. I can share with you my best experiences in the field, uh, not necessarily as a consultant, but as a real estate broker. So should you want to add, maybe from the audience, there are also some real estate consultants or fellow brokers or registered agents who are in the industry for quite some time. That would be good if you can also share during the question and answer portion after my presentation, because I believe each one has also to share in this particular session. So let me bring you now to my slides. Thank you, admin, the two lovely ladies there, Pressy and Saisa. Good morning for the two of you. And here, we will have to tackle on the basics because I understand once you're already in the field, there would be a lot of changes and you have to also cope with these changes. So I understand each one of you is very driven at this time to practice doing the business. That's why I warmly welcome you all. I intentionally put the background of the trees and the green trees because it's pleasing to the eyes. Because maybe you have heard of the saying that if you plant a tree, you will have a 10-year prosperity. So in practicing the real estate business, you're planting prosperity. It's not an instant millions. It's not an instant, how do you call that, prosperity, but it's the work of your hands. It is a journey and it is a process. That's why we're here to give you some tips on how to do the business. So the main objective of this seminar for the new ones, my warmest welcome. The new in the business, it's an orientation on your part. But for the ones who are in the business for quite some time, or even for the longest time, this may just be a refresher, or maybe just a review on your part on the basic concepts and dynamics of real estate brokerage. But definitely the meat of the matter of the presentation is more on the best practices that we may learn, that we may discover in the field. And the specific objectives, this is just for you to have the idea as to where are we headed to. So for sure, we have to define, especially for the first timer, we have to know what is really real estate business. Is it a service? Is it a business? Or is it a social enterprise? And then from there, we have to trace its conceptual framework. And then we have to differentiate brokerage selling from project selling, because we have two options in practicing real estate. We have brokerage selling, which is more a little bit complicated, but at the same time challenging, but I can assure you it's highly rewarding. For sure, equally rewarding with project selling, but there are some differences. And then we have to identify the advantages and disadvantages of brokerage selling. Why we need to have this, it's for you to know, well, what would be your niche? What would be your comfort? What would be your specialty later on? Would it be project selling? Would it be brokerage selling? Or would it be both? You will be the master of both worlds. And the next one would be, we have also to know, if we are in the business of real estate, what are the duties and responsibilities of being a seller's broker? I understand we can be either a seller's broker or seller's agent, or a buyer's broker or a broker's agent. It will depend on who is the one are we serving. So if we are serving the seller, the one who would be selling the property, or are we serving the buyer, the one who would buy the real estate property? So it's either or, so much the better if you are serving both the seller and the buyer, because all the commission goes to you, although it also entails a lot of responsibilities. That's why we have to know what are the duties and responsibilities of being an agent and being a broker. And then the next one is to familiarize the process or the dynamics of real estate brokerage. Then enumerate the do's and don'ts. The do's and don'ts, these are the things, the best practices, and the undesirable. We have to equally know the undesirable practices that are going on in the market nowadays. We have to know that we have to be extra wary that there are dirty players in the market. So we have to know all these things. We have to be extra wary and extra careful. And then the next thing is we have to orient ourselves also on the different documentation forms, because I understand being in the brokerage, sometimes you'll be in a one-man army journey. You have to do all things. So we have to be familiar with the documentation forms in the transaction or sale transaction process. And for sure, knowing all these things, we will be able to appreciate the beauty of real estate brokerage as a business and as a form of service. And we have to embrace Boston. Always emphasize this, the distinct culture of Filipino homes. So do you belong? Are you happy with Filipino homes? What makes you happy? It's because of the strong brand and the distinct culture that we have. So later on, we will be discussing this. And then the last is, for sure, the end result. We have to create more sales or good results. We have to do our part in the business, in the practice of real estate brokerage. So much we have to skip this one because this is just for the sake of having you an overview for the course outline. We will proceed now to the operational definition. But before that, can I have a show of hands or maybe a show of a yes answer in the chat box? If are you okay? Are you feeling well today, specifically this morning? Can you make use of your chat box just for us to have an interaction? You can say yes, or you can show an emoticon to your chat box. And I hope all of you there are doing well, and I hope you are following. So just for purposes of introduction, we have to define what is really real estate brokerage. For sure, the key terms involved here: business or a service, a middleman, which is the broker or the sales agent, and the sale transaction itself, which is the key thing, the most critical part, the buying and the selling transaction, and the real estate property, or this is the commodity that is being facilitated in the sale transaction. So real estate brokerage, just to give you a clear conceptual framework, it's a business, and at the same time, it's a service. We're serving both the seller and the buyer. We're serving also the people in need of real estate properties. And for sure, if this is a service, there needs to be a service or a service person, the one involved in the service, the one who does the service, which is in the person of the middleman, the broker. So why very critical, the broker nowadays? In fact, we are not just the defender, we are not just the assistant of the seller and the buyer. We also sometimes act as the pseudo attorney, pseudo lawyer, although we have to consult also a lawyer when it comes to the transaction. Why we are in the middle? Because we have to both, either we serve the seller or we serve the buyer in order to facilitate the sale transaction to be smooth and successful as possible. So the sale transaction, the buying and the selling transaction, wouldn't be possible for sure if there is no commodity. There is no real estate property in hand, just like prime lot, commercial lots, agricultural lots, or house and lot, or the project, how do you call that, the project listings. And for sure, there has to be the need of the seller to sell the property, and the need of the buyer to also purchase or acquire the property. So we have to establish that needs, and we have to address that needs. And that's the duty, the very critical duty of the agent or the broker, to address the needs appropriately, the needs of the seller or the needs of the buyer. So that makes up the real estate brokerage as a service and as a business possible. I hope you're following me. So this is now the illustration. This is very simple. As you may understand, the broker is in the middle, or the agent, the sales agent is in the middle. Broker and the sales agent are always in collaborative effort, for sure. We are in the middle because whatever needs, whatever concerns of the seller, we have to address to appropriately. Whatever needs and concerns of the buyer, we have to address to appropriately. And sometimes it's also, how do you call that, challenging if in a case you are you're serving both the seller and the buyer. So sometimes the two parties, seller and buyer, they are not in alignment when it comes to their preferences. So that would be a dilemma. I know some of you here might have experienced already being in a dilemma. You're caught in between. How do you call that? You're caught in between as to whoever would you please. Would it be the seller? Would it be the buyer? Or you need to please both. So as much as possible, you have to be extra careful. You have to establish, how do you call that? A very good relationship, a harmonious relationship, with both the seller and the buyer. So this thing, it's also nice to come from your ground and center, and for you to also be facilitative, because sometimes your biases would also get in the way, and sometimes you get insulted by the seller, you get insulted either by the buyer, so you also have to come from your ground and center just to make things smooth in the sale transaction. So again and again, very critical is the role of the agent and the role of the broker being a middleman, and this involves harmonious relationship that we are aiming for, a smooth sale transaction and a very smooth relationship between the seller and the buyer. Okay, I hope it's clear now. So who are now the persons? Am I too fast? Maybe you can comment in the chat box if I'm too fast. Maybe especially for those who are new. You just have for me to be aware of, you can make a comment on the chat box. So who are these persons legally allowed? I understand the Professional Regulations Commission, or PRC, is now very clear when it comes to its implementing rules and regulations when it comes to the practice of real estate brokerage. So these are the persons legally allowed to do the business. Licensed real estate broker as an individual practitioner, a company or firm, just like the very big and #1 company, Filipino Homes, our very own Filipino Homes, that is engaged in real estate brokerage or in a real estate consulting service, because there are cases that you're into real estate consulting service, not so much on sales and marketing, but into consulting service. And for sure, with brokers as partners or as employees, or even agents as partners or employees. So that's a company or a firm, just like Filipino Homes. And then we have the registered real estate agent under the supervision. This is very important. A real estate agent, even if he's a registered agent, he is not under the supervision of a licensed real estate broker, so it's not allowed. It has to be, or you need to be, under the supervision. That's why in Filipino Homes, we always have our grouping, our cell. We always have our group, so that each one has to belong to a certain group and to have the direct supervision of a real estate broker, a licensed one. Okay, all right. Interest in the property. As you may have experienced, I don't know, me on my part, I've experienced some pseudo buyers. They just pretend, especially when you are posting these properties online. There are a lot of inquiries, but you have to pre-screen these inquiries, because not all inquiries are legit inquiries. Sometimes they're just getting information from your end. So you have to be extra careful in pre-qualifying doing the background of your buyers. Are you still with me? Okay. So that is to protect your seller from having fraudulent sale transaction. For one, I have experienced, shall we say, how do you call that? A heartbreaking experience with a pseudo buyer who pretended himself as the cousin of the owner of ABS-CBN. We almost get into the signing of the deed of absolute sale. Good that there was an intervention. It didn't push through. It didn't push through because he cannot provide the cash. He cannot provide the manager's check. So we ended up making the transaction null and void. So I went to the lawyer to make the transaction null and void, especially the deed of sale, because we already signed the deed of sale, even if without the manager's check yet, thinking that the manager's check is already there, but you cannot present. But anyway, that is just for an example. Let's proceed to the next responsibility. We have to be extra careful, by the way, because you are the lawyer. You're the pseudo lawyer, or maybe acting like a lawyer to your seller or to the one that you're serving with. You have to pre-screen potential buyers before endorsing them to the seller. Because sometimes seller would require you as the middleman to have the background on the buying capacity of your buyer. Again and again, especially it involves billions, it involves hundreds of millions. Seller would require to have maybe some financial statements on the part of the seller, if it's a corporation or if it's an individual. This is to avoid money laundering. So anti-money laundering, that's very critical. We have to know who the person we are dealing with and the source, where the source of money is. And again, another responsibility is to facilitate the sale transaction and coordinate with the buyer's broker and lawyer. Okay. So again, another responsibility of the seller's broker is you have to share, we're done with this, sharing the listing with any trusted broker. Here, to protect the seller from having or experiencing fraudulent, meaning it's really a transaction which is not legal. So fraudulent sale transactions, you have to be extra careful with that. You have to do your background check with the buyer. Again and again, you're serving as most likely of a lawyer, a pseudo lawyer, and at the same time, an assistant to your seller or even to your buyer as well. So here we are referring to the seller as your master, as the one you're serving with. So you have to pre-screen your potential buyers. Again and again, this is to also background check. And you have to facilitate the sale transaction and coordinate with the buyer's broker. For you to have the smooth sale transaction, there needs to have a smooth coordination with the buyer's broker. If you are serving the seller or the listing, the property owner rather. So you have to coordinate the buyer's broker and the buyer's lawyer for you to have a smooth sale transaction. And both parties are happy. That has been our goal, that whenever we do sale transaction, both parties, both the seller and the buyer, are happy with it. Okay? So that brings a fulfillment on our part, being the middleman. Okay? And then that will give you, if you have a very smooth sale transaction with both parties, or dealing with both parties, you will have that trust and confidence both from the buyer and the seller. So you will be able to establish a trusting relationship with either the seller or the buyer. And here in this case, being the seller's broker, that's with the seller. And this is very critical. Take note of this. You have to ask for a signed authority to sell from the seller, even if the seller is your very close friend or your big boss or your supervisor or maybe your relative. That is to protect you, because our service is holy. We have to honor our service so as much as possible. Or else if the seller would really, how do you call that, insist that he can always be trusted upon by not necessarily giving an authority to sell, but as much as possible, you need to have an authority to sell sign, because that is your way, that is your protection, being the middleman, that you're authorized to market the property, you're authorized to do the sale transaction. Okay, clear. And we have to fast track this. Know the buyer's specifications, another responsibility. Let's move on to the buyer's broker now. A while ago, we're discussing about the responsibility of the seller's broker. This time, the buyer's broker or the buyer's agent. If you're the one bringing in the buyer, me personally, as much as possible, I will be the one to bring in the buyer. Why? Because you will become the head broker of the sale transaction. And the good thing is you're in command of the process. You're in command of the transaction, because very critical is the decision of the buyer. Even if the seller is ready, if the buyer is not ready to buy, there will be no transaction. Although, if your buyer's money is ready and the seller is not ready to sell also, there would be no transaction as well. But nowadays, very rare to find a buyer. So we have to choose our own buyers. So very critical also if you are the buyer's broker. So as much as possible, bring in the buyer with you, because you will also you will also be given the commission right away by the seller, because you're bringing in buyer. That's a blessing to the seller, that you're bringing in a lot of potential buyers. So that means it's likely that his property would get sold at a very short time, right? Okay. So you have to know, being a buyer's agent, you have to know the specifications of the property or the specifications on the property that your buyer is looking for. So this is now more focused on needs selling. We don't have to push a property because that is the only property available. We have to push or offer that property to the buyer because that will address his needs. That's why before offering the listings or the potential listings to our buyer, we have to know what does our buyer need? What are the specifications that he needs rather, and what are the requirements that he needs. So we have to know that because that would form part of our reference as to which properties are most likely will get a go signal from your buyer. So that will give you a very good batting average. The key thing there is you will have a very good batting average if you know the needs of your buyer. You get the specifications on the property that your buyer is, on what your buyer is looking for. Okay. Next is you canvass or look for properties that are within. So this is related to the first one. You have to canvass or look for properties that are within the specifications of your buyer, so that you will have your buyer will have more options to choose from. And then on top of that, you have to pre-screen and research thoroughly the details about each property. By the way, when it comes to industrial lot, commercial lots, or farm lots, or even housing lot or condominiums, the resale condominiums, not necessarily from the projects or developer, because usually here, just the quicker look on the rest of the responsibility, the last few items. Here we on the part of the buyer's broker, we have to prepare a draft for an offer to buy or intent to buy for your buyer. Later on, I'll show you maybe if we still have the time, a format or maybe a sample letter of this intent to buy letter. And that's one of your responsibilities if your buyer has already given you the go signal to buy. Next is you have to protect your buyer from any illegal or fraudulent sale transactions. Same with the seller's case. And then for sure that could be avoided if you have a thorough due diligence on the papers or documents of the property, including the relocation survey. This is to avoid encroachment when it comes to the property boundaries. Okay, I hope everyone is okay and is doing well. Thank you for being patient with me. And then this one, another responsibility is to establish good and trusting relationship with your buyer. Again, same with the seller. Then coordinate with the seller's broker and the seller's lawyer. Okay, so more or less the same with the seller's broker responsibilities. Just a quick look on the anatomy. We call this anatomy, or the process involved, just the summary of it all. The process involved in real estate brokerage. First and foremost, you have to procure your listings, maybe from the listing owners or from your fellow practitioners, fellow brokers, fellow agents, or maybe other agents from other agencies that you also have the trust and confidence with. So you have to know also your connection, okay? So for you to have a pool of reliable, take note of reliable listings, because if these listings are not reliable, it's useless, okay? So what makes it reliable? By thorough research, by thorough background check, okay? And also you get all the necessary data. Next is you have to market. Again, this is given already. We are provided with enough training by the company, by Filipino Homes. We have FIRE already, a very, how do you call that? A prestigious training academy, which is just recently launched by our big bossing Tonton. I would always have a grand salute to Tonton for really coming up with this project, with this program, because it will come out that all the agents and brokers of Filipino Homes are really, how do you call that? Well-trained, well-groomed, and ready ready to serve the market. So you have to market that in your own platform, whatever platform that you believe it would really be visible to your target market. So you may also share your direct listings, and that is also to create more potential buyers if you are the listing broker or listing agent. If you don't have enough number of potential buyers, you can share that to any other agent, trusted agent or broker, if the property is your direct listing. And then when you have buyers, there are objections. Not all buyers would always give you the go signal. Not all buyers would make it a sale on your part. So you will really experience a lot of objections and a lot of rejections. So in the sales, wherever you go, whatever industry you may be into, there's always rejection. And we have to be master when it comes to rejection. So I think all of us here know already how to handle rejections and how to handle objections. You just have to come from your ground and center and know your worth, know your product, know your worth, know where you stand. And you just have to come from your ground and center. And that will help. That will help in handling objections. Okay. So negotiation and closing the deal. I understand there might be sales guru here in our participants. They're experts in closing the deal. They're experts in negotiation. So that might be of help. Maybe you can share later on in the open forum or question and answer portion if you have your own strategy in closing the deal or in negotiation. And later on, we will also discuss some in the best practices later on. And then another process involved is facilitating the sale transaction. This is now the critical thing because you have to prepare the documents, you have to set the date, you have to coordinate with the lawyer, and then the check payment, if it's cash or if it's bank to bank, whatsoever, or if it's bank financing. So you have to facilitate all this. And you also facilitate the transfer of documents. Take note, sometimes when you are a broker and you also have your network of agents, to motivate also your buyers and also your seller, you will just have the documentation or the transfer of documents under the name of the buyer to serve as free or an extra service. It's an added value on your part being a broker or being an agent. So it will be how do you call that? It's more of a pro bono or an added value on your part in servicing them. So in my case, sometimes I would make it a free, but if the commission is just below 5%, for sure I have to demand for a payment because I have to hire for a document processor to do this because it's time consuming to go to the BIR, to go to the register of deeds, and then this and that. So again, it's also nice to also have an assistant so you can delegate on the transfer of documents. We call that document processing after the sale transaction. So this is what we call after sale service. So if you have very good after sale service to your buyer, chances are he will have or you will have a repeat sale later on because he might have another need or another requirement. Okay, so we're done with that. Documentation forms. Maybe I just want to have a run through, not necessarily one by one opening all the files because that would take so much time, and we still have the most important thing, the best practices. So these are the brokerage documentation forms that we would usually use. The authority to sell for sure before marketing the property, the intent to buy once the buyer has already given you the go signal, and then the memorandum of agreement. Don't you worry, for those who are new, I can share the files, or maybe the admin ladies, Sai and Presi, can share this with you, the documentation forms, to serve as your sample forms later on. So the memorandum of agreement, there are sellers or buyers that aside from having the deed of absolute sale, they want to have a memorandum of agreement that will give the details as to whoever pays the capital gains tax, the documentary stamp tax, the notarial fee, and all this and that, the brokerage fee. So that will be stipulated in the memorandum of agreement. However, if it's a net listing, other seller would no longer require for a memorandum or MOA, because everything is being taken care of or shall be for the account of the buyer if it's a net listing. But if it's a standard, this is very critical, the memorandum of agreement, because while in the sale transaction, in the process, there might be cases that the buyer wouldn't pay for the transfer expense because, you know, it's not being well coordinated or not agreed upon, or maybe there's no documentation to prove. But again and again, usually in the sale transaction, the buyer would pay for that transfer expense. But in the case of net listing, buyer would pay, other than the transfer expense, would pay the notarial fee, the capital gains tax, the documentary stamp tax, and other things. The miscellaneous fees, the one who will process the transfer of documents. So you have to know that. Then the contract to sell. This is another form. By the way, the contract to sell and the deed of conditional sale, they're more or less the same. I'm not a lawyer, but in my own assessment, they are more or less the same when it comes to the stipulations, because the contract to sell is a document that would give protection to both parties, the seller and the buyer, that the buyer would no longer back out in the transaction, and the seller would no longer entertain any other buyer. So contract to sell, especially if there's a down payment or if there is an earnest money paid by the buyer, you are required to have the contract to sell. Why? Because you can never have the deed of absolute sale yet, because there's no full payment yet, if that is just a down payment or an earnest money. So very critical to have this contract to sell or deed of conditional sale. For sure, the lawyer would also advise the buyer to have this document. And the deed of absolute sale, if, yes, hello, okay, is
What?
everything okay?
Yes, boss.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Sai. So let's proceed. Another form is the deed of absolute sale. It's a Yahoo already. It's a Yahoo experience. You pay Yahoo if there's already the sale transaction and it's already a deed of absolute sale. That means there's already full payment. And sometimes the deed of absolute sale is unilateral. What does it mean by unilateral? It's a type of DOA or DOA's, deed of absolute sale, wherein only the seller will sign in the document. No, not anymore the buyer, because it's unilateral, especially if the husband of the buyer or the spouse of the buyer is not around, or the buyer has only an SPA whatsoever. So it's best to have the unilateral deed of absolute sale, so that the seller will be the only one to sign in the document. But if it's bilateral or the standard, it's both the buyer and the seller will sign in the deed of absolute sale. Okay? So I hope it's clear. Let's proceed to some more documentation or forms. Acknowledgement receipt for the payment receipt for the property. This goes along with the deed of absolute sale. There's always the acknowledgement receipt. And you have to specify the description of the property. What I would usually do, I would just copy paste the description of the property from the deed of absolute sale, and then you put it in the acknowledgement receipt. That would really bring proof that that is the amount being paid for that property being purchased. And another thing, you also have to come up with an acknowledgement receipt for your commission, so that you would no longer demand for another commission if the full commission has already been received. Okay? So that's for the commission. It's a blessing already once you get the commission. So you need to also produce acknowledgement receipt, and you have to give this to the seller, the one who gave you the commission. And the transmittal form. Maybe some brokers would not use transmittal form. Maybe in most of the offices, it's just so simple. When you are endorsing legal documents to the seller or to the buyer, please make a transmittal form. This is to document what are the forms that you have endorsed, especially if it's certified through copy. Or during the sale transaction after payment, there needs to be a transmittal form that all these documents have been endorsed to the buyer after the sale transaction, just like the original copy of the or owner's copy of the title, the signed deed of absolute sale, the certified through copy, tax clearance, court clearance. So it has to be outlined, or it has to be enumerated in the transmittal form. What are these documents that you have endorsed to either the seller or the buyer? That is for documentation purpose. I don't know if some are practicing this, but me, I'm practicing, or I'm using transmittal form during the sale transaction. Okay? And special power of attorney for the document processor. This is very much needed nowadays, because the seller will no longer need to do the payment of the taxes, the capital gains, and go to the BIR. So it has to be done by the document processor, and the RD and BIR would not acknowledge if there, or would not allow you to process without a special power of attorney. So the moment you do your sale transaction, take note of this. This is based on my practice. I would always draft, if your lawyer is not drafting, I would always draft, because I have my sample already, or a prototype. I would always draft a special power of attorney of my document processor with the address, the ID number, and so on and so forth, with the photocopy of his valid ID. Because this is needed, because the principal or the seller will be the one to sign this special power of attorney. And also your attorney, in fact, the document processor, will also sign in the document. So both the seller or the owner of the property as principal, the one giving the special power of attorney, and the attorney, in fact, who is the one, or who will be the one processing the documents later on in the Register of Deeds and BIR. So this is needed. And another SPA is if the person or the owner of the property is not present during the sale transaction, because the signing, it has to be, personal, very personal. But if he cannot be available, he wouldn't be available, he cannot really come in person, you need, or he needs to issue a special power of attorney. For sure, if it's out of the country, if the person is out of the country, it has to be consularized, because it wouldn't be acknowledged here if it's not consularized by the embassy. If the owner is outside of the country, because most of the properties here, the owners are already residing in the States. So you need to have an SPA which is consularized. Okay? I hope everything is clear. Again and again, the principal is the owner, and the attorney, in fact, is the one representing the owner, be it a relative, be it a lawyer. So it would depend on the seller as to whoever is he going to assign as the attorney, in fact, of the sale transaction. Okay, I hope you're still with me. Take a deep breath. And one more deep breath. Okay. So other documents, this is very self-explanatory. Certified through copy of lot title and tax declaration. You can get this from, the lot title is the certified through copy. You can get this from the Register of Deeds. The ones in the field for so many years, they're very expert on this. And they even have connections inside, so you can get all these things, all these documents in just 3 days or maybe a day. So you just have to establish network. So tax declaration, you get it at the assessor's office. Tax clearance, still in the assessor's office. Me, in my case, I just recently got the tax clearance of my buyer, although the sale transaction is not yet pushed through because the seller is in the States. You have to get the tax clearance in SM, no longer in the assessor's office. You only get the tax declaration in the assessor, and also the certificate of no improvement or certificate of with improvement in the assessor's office. But the tax clearance, you have to get it in SM. They have their office also there, extension office. That is based on my recent experience. And then original receipt or photocopy of the recent property tax payment. Yes, you need to have this for the tax clearance. For the real property tax payment, it has to be 1 year. Some would have it quarterly. So as much as possible, it has to be updated because you can never be given a tax clearance unless you are paid with the real property tax due. So tax clearance. Then certificate of no improvement or with improvement in cases of lot only or lots for sale with buildings. So you need to have certificate with improvement. This is from the assessor's office. These things are needed in the sale transaction. Then court clearance only if needed by both buyer. Usually the buyer would always need this if there are some things that are annotated on the title and they need to make sure that the property is clean or free from any lien or encumbrance. So they need court clearance. And usually if the property is tax declaration only, because there are cases that the property is not titled and still the property is marketable, you need to get court clearance because there might be cases that there are adverse claims. So this is very important. You get court clearance. Then GIS. I just have a run through because sometimes this is not applicable, the GIS or constitution and bylaws, if this is not corporation owned. But if it's corporation owned, you need this. Then board resolution if corporation owned, secretary certificate if corporation owned. This is based on my experience. You need all these things if the property is corporation owned. There are a lot of documents to secure. Then certification from the city planning only if needed by the buyer, because sometimes the buyer is not knowledgeable that there's an ongoing road widening project in the area. So he has to know what must be the usable lot area right after or lot size right after the road widening. So some of my buyers would require me to go to the city planning or zoning department just to make sure that the property doesn't have an ongoing or the approved project of road widening. That's very critical. Okay, and then relocation survey document or the sketch plan. In case of an uphill, downhill lot terrain, you need a topography for the architect later on to plan out for the property to be built. And that's very important, the topography. But if it's flat terrain, no need for a topography. Only the sketch plan or the relocation or lot plan. Okay, this is very important to have relocation survey. This is to avoid, how do you call that? To avoid encroachment. Okay, this is the meat of the matter. That's why I'm very fast because I have to make sure that I still have the time for the best practices because it's the meat of the matter when it comes to my presentation. Take a deep breath. Okay, we are now here for the best practices in brokerage. Okay, number 1, secure good listings from the property owners, because if you have good listings, you can also invite more potential buyers. If your listings are really marketable and one of a kind and all the details are in there and it's really of good price and it's really a good strategic location, then it's really a good listing. Okay, and for sure it's a good listing if it's free of any encumbrance or any lien whatsoever, or there's no annotation on the title. But if it's loaned in the bank, that's an indication that the property is good. If it's loaned in the bank, because the bank is very strict when it comes to due diligence or appraisal on the property. So you need not worry if there's a mortgage from the bank, because once the sale transaction is pushed through, you will just have to cancel the mortgage and do the release of mortgage. So release of mortgage and the cancellation of mortgage should have to be done. So it's not a problem when the property is having a mortgage or under the bank. And that's number 1. Number 2, make sure, again, this has been mentioned a while ago, make sure you have assigned authority to sell for each of your direct listing. It's so nice to have direct listing because you're in command of the the property, and you can market the property so well because you're knowledgeable of your property. And if you have your direct buyer, chances are you will get the 5% commission. It goes straight to you. You don't have to share it with any other broker because you're bringing in both buyer and you're also coordinating with the seller. Okay, number 3, update from time to time your authority to sell, because if it's already expired, you would no longer be honored by the seller. And this is the key. This is the document that will protect you, wherein you can assert your commission. If you don't have an ATS, there might be cases that the seller will just left without you knowing it, without your commission being endorsed to you, and you will end up frustrated. So as much as possible, establish a very good relationship with your seller, because the seller is the one giving you the commission. And as much as possible, you have an authority to sell signed. Although there are cases that they wouldn't issue an ATS, special cases, if you know him very well already, that he wouldn't do some, he wouldn't deny his obligation to you. So, but again, you have to protect yourself by having ATS. Next, update from time to time your listings posted in any of the platform, be it in Filipino Homes or in other social media platforms published online, in terms of the price and availability, because sometimes the website will just automatically renew the listing, and then the listing is already taken or sold, so you have to update that. And also the price, because sometimes the seller would change the price, maybe because the zonal value has already increased, or the market value has already increased, or maybe the seller has also some needs or financial needs. So you need to also update your listing when it comes to this. Next, you have to get to know well about each of the property being listed. So I think this has been discussed already a while ago, because you cannot sell what you're not knowledgeable of. So you have to be knowledgeable about your product, about your listings. Get all the data needed. The next is you visit the site before endorsing it to your buyer, because sometimes you just endorse the property to your buyer right away without even first visiting the site. Sometimes you don't know the frontage yet, you don't know the exact location yet, or even the terrain, so you cannot also address the queries or clarifications of the buyer. So it's but advisable that you have to take a look at the site first and get the documents before endorsing it to your buyer, because again and again, we have to create a good impression to our buyer. Okay, are you still with me? Okay, you create a good image. Remember, we belong to a big company, a very big company, Filipino Homes. So you market your listings in different platforms. In our case, we're so blessed to have our very own Filipino Homes, which is very much well known in the entire country and even abroad for sure. And only share your direct listings. This is my principle. I don't know if some would agree. Only share your direct listings to trusted brokers and agents. For sure, because when it comes to commission sharing later on, we have to avoid complications or conflict. So you have to know also your network. Okay, you have to know your network. And respect. Respect is very important, and that would form part of the brand that we are creating in our company. Okay, the brand, meaning the culture. Continuation here. Bring the lot plan with you and some other documents during the site visit. This is usually my practice. I don't know for some if they're also doing this, especially when it comes to lot only, and also even for houses, because they want to know the boundaries of the properties. It's better to have a copy, a photocopy of your lot plan. Although initially you're already forwarding this through Viber or through email or through Messenger, the properties, you can just browse it through in front of your client later on. Once you're already in front of your client, You can bring the hard copy, or even in your phone, you can also browse it through and present it to the buyer during your confrontation or the site visit. So bring that, because it's very important to show to the buyer the road frontage, the lot depth, or how would we say it in Tagalog? In the lot, ang lalim ng lupa. Okay, the lot depth, ang lalim ng lupa. Okay, the measurement from the frontage to the back portion, that's the lot depth. Okay, important thing is you package yourself when you set an appointment with your client. Again and again, be professional. One of the key values in Philippine homes is professionalism. This has to be highly valued, professionalism in our practice. Not only in the way you dress up, but in the way you deal with your buyers, in the way you deal with your fellow practitioners, with your fellow brokers, with your fellow agents. You have to be professional, not just in the way you dress up, but in your dealings with your client, the internal clients, just like our fellow practitioners, and the external clients, our buyers or the sellers. And then, okay, along with the previous emphasis, we have to create a brand. Why we need to be professional in our dealings? Because we need to create a brand when we present ourselves to our client before the sale, during the sale, and even after sale service, after the sale transaction. You need to create a brand that you are a person worthy of trust on the part of your seller and on the part of your buyer. And it will also give an image to our company that when it comes to Filipino homes, their agents are trustworthy, their agents are smart, their agents are attractive, physically attractive, and their agents are very professional. So it would create an image. So you are part of that image and you're creating that image. Okay. And then another thing is we have to use clear pictures of the property when publishing it online. This is very important because especially if it's a house and lot, at least all parts of the house have to be documented, and it has to be clear picture, presentable picture, because again and again, these are visual illustrations of the property that we are marketing. It's very critical. Next. We have to fast track. You make use of your good content writing, diba? If we are publishing our property in an album, we have to have a good content writing. So maybe you will have your editor. If you're good in grammar, so maybe you don't need an editor anymore. So you need to have good content writing, which are very basic. This is very basic. So what are the main components of your property description? So just like the lot, it has to be the road frontage, the lot depth, lot terrain, lot shape, the vicinities, the neighboring establishments. These are very important in your content writing when it comes to describing your property. And also the distance from the highway, the distance from the main road. What about the road right of way? So these are very critical in your content writing. And then another thing, this is very important also. You address your queries, especially we're dealing with online potential buyers. They have a lot of concerns or queries. So as much as possible, we have to allocate time to answer all their queries as much as possible. You create sense of urgency because we are not the only person dealing with them. So you would never know that there are also other agents or brokers that they're inquiring with, and that agent or broker is very prompt in addressing the concerns. So chances are that buyer will go to that agent or broker. So again, create that sense of urgency, address the concerns promptly, and then make a follow-up on your client after the site visit. For me, sometimes it would be in the evening or maybe late afternoon or maybe a day after, because sometimes I need to have some space right after making a follow-up as to the feedback of your offer, the feedback of your buyer regarding the property that you're offering. And you may do it in a subtle or gentle way so as not to pressure your buyer as well or your client. Then time check is 12:03, but we have to fast track. Remind your client about the appointment a day before. If you have a site viewing appointment or the property viewing when it comes to houses, remind your client, because for sure clients are always on the go. Sometimes they might forget. So you yourself, being an assistant, being of service to your buyer, you have to remind your client a day before, or even on that same day, maybe 2 or few hours before your appointment. And then be transparent with your client when it comes to details, because sometimes if you know, if you have additional knowledge on the property and that does not mean, that has not been divulged yet to your buyer or seller, so you really have to be transparent when it comes to your due diligence on the papers of the property. You always have to declare it openly and honestly to your buyer and to your seller when it comes to the background of your buyers. Again and again, be transparent to your client. It's either buyer or the seller. The next is be knowledgeable about the property you're offering. So I think I discussed this already. Then establish good and trusting relationship. I discussed this already. Be prudent in the way you handle the concerns of your buyer and seller, because sometimes buyers are also demanding, sellers are also demanding. So it would sometimes stretch our patience. It would take a lot of coolness on our part, a lot of patience on our part to really serve our clients in the best way we can. So bottom line, at the end of the day, it create you are the one creating the image. You are the one establishing the trusting relationship with your client. Okay. Next is encourage your buyer to do due diligence, because sometimes buyers are not knowledgeable, especially young buyers. They are not, how do you call that, investment savvy enough when it comes to real estate investment. So they need your guidance, they need your advice. So you have to advise them to do due diligence with the help of their lawyer on the documents of the property before making an offer to buy, especially about relocation survey also, if needed. But when it comes to subdivision, I think some of my buyers would no longer need relocation survey, because the boundaries are already being, how do you call that? Uh, you can already see right away the boundaries whenever you do the site visit. Next is you let your buyer see first the property before allowing him to negotiate on the price with the seller. I have this experience, even if the buyer has not visited or even checked the property yet, they already made a negotiation on the price. So this is the thing. I would do it gently. Sir, I understand that you would always look for properties which are really of a good price and a good deal. But before we would negotiate on the price, I would require you to visit the site first. At least you will have an overview if this is really worth investing with, if the property is really worth investing in or worth on your part to invest in. So that's very good thing that you have to advise your buyer. Because me, I would also respect the seller, that even if the buyer is not yet sure of his decision and then he's already negotiating on the price, that's not good also on the part of the seller, because if the buyer is already sure to get the property when in fact he has not seen yet the property. So again, let the buyer see first the property before making an offer, or even let the buyer do the due diligence before making an offer to buy. And it is equally important also on your part, being the listing agent or listing broker, to register your interested buyer, especially if that property has, how do you call that, parang in demand to a lot of potential buyers, and there are a lot of takers. So you have to register your interested buyer to the seller so that the credit would go to you. Okay. Later on, when it comes to giving of commission, it wouldn't be credited to any other broker, but it has to be you, because you are the first one to register that legit buyer to the seller. Okay. I hope you're still alive and alert. Okay, we have to proceed. Another important thing is you have to issue an acknowledgement receipt to the seller once you receive your commission. This has been discussed already. And always make it clear to the buyer if the sale transaction is standard or net listing. I think this has to be incorporated in your property description so that it will create a mindset on the part of the buyer if the property that he is really interested in is of standard sale transaction or net listing. So it's more on leveling of expectations, because sometimes the buyer would only get shocked that he was thinking that it's a standard, but when it comes to the sale transaction proper, the transaction is net listing and he's expected to pay everything, the sale taxes. So that is not a good practice. So as much as possible, it has to be agreed upon before the sale transaction as to whoever pays the taxes and other expenses. Okay. Next is broker's fee should have to be agreed upon in advance prior to giving your commitment to the seller. Why? Because sometimes if there's no prior agreement when it comes to your commission, if the buyer is already there and there's an ongoing transaction already, and sometimes seller would not be true to their commitment, instead of 5%, they will just give you 3%. And especially if you don't have an ATS, so as much as possible, make an ATS, have it signed, or make an agreement as to how much is the seller willing to pay you as a commission, for a commission. So that has to be agreed upon. Very important, yeah, because that is our service fee. Okay, we have to honor our service. Next, encourage the buyer and seller to come up with a memorandum of agreement stipulating the terms and conditions in the sale transaction. This is very important, especially if the seller is kind of, how do you call that? In Tagalog, sigurista, or maybe in Visayas, sigurista. You want to make sure that whoever pays this and that, it has to be clearly stipulated in the memorandum of agreement, especially if he doesn't know that well, the buyer. So it has to be stipulated in the memorandum of agreement, aside from the deed of absolute sale. But other sellers or buyers, they would no longer need the MOA because they know very well the buyer, the buying capacity, the background, the integrity. And it's a net listing, meaning buyer would pay all the sale taxes on top of the transfer expense. So they don't need the MOA. Again, it would depend on your clients. But you can always advise. But if you don't need it, then you just have to follow. Okay, so we have here another one. Address the objection or rejections of your client in a proactive way. Because sometimes we may not be perfect. Sometimes we get irked, we get insulted. You just have to keep your cool, and you just have to address the rejection or objection of your clients in a proactive way, meaning not in a reactive way, but in a gentle, proactive way, so that the buyer wouldn't also lose the trust that he has invested in you. Next, emphasize need selling. I think this has been discussed rather than product selling, because some would practice hard selling. They push this one, this house and lot, even if they don't know the background of the developer and so on and so forth, the materials used and so on and so forth. So as much as possible, you have to know the needs, the cash exposure, or the paying capacity of the buyer. You have to know their lot requirement, their house requirements, and so on and so forth. So focus more on need selling. Why? This will lead you to have a very good batting average, and later on you will close the deal because you're addressing the need instead of just pushing your product. Okay, very important. Next is be gentle to both the buyer and the seller when it comes to negotiation. This is also very much critical, because sometimes we're dealing with different personalities, we're dealing with different backgrounds, with different orientations. Sometimes seller is very demanding, sometimes buyer is very demanding, and you're in the middle, you're caught in between. That can also cause dilemma on your part. So if you keep your cool and you have that patience in you and you're proactive, and you will really survive and you will thrive. You will end up a victor, a winner, okay, from there. Again, you have to serve and both the buyer and the seller. Next is you stay connected with your existing frequent buyers because sometimes they would do repeat sale or they will be considered as repeat buyers because they are delighted buyers. They are satisfied buyers because you serve them very well. So they can even give you other potential buyers. I experienced this one. If you have a very good and trusting relationship with your frequent or existing buyers or previous buyers, they can even refer you to their friends who might be in need of your service as well. So the key thing in there is a trusting relationship, integrity. Next is have a directory of all the buyers that you close deal with. Because chances are these buyers would also become your potential buyers later on for a repeat sale. Or sometimes they're into buy and sell properties, so they will buy this one, and then build, and then sell. And then they will buy another one, build, and sell. So sometimes buyers are like that. So that will become your repeat buyers if you have a very good relationship with them. So establish good relationship. I hope you're still with me. Take a deep breath. Okay. So you record all the inquiries of your potential buyers. Me, on my part, these things that I'm sharing with you are my personal experiences. It may not necessarily hold truth on your part, but this is based on my experience. So if you are comfortable with this, you can also follow. Me, I have my own journal of the inquiries of my buyers so that I can keep track or even trace or even follow up, make a follow up when it comes to their property specifications, and also make a follow up and be prudent. Okay, very important. Be prudent in closing the deal with your client. It's very critical part of the sales process. So you have to go with the momentum of the buyer because, or else the buyer might back out. So you have to really be patient and create that sense of urgency and create that energy. For sure, in a gentle manner. Okay, especially once the buyer has already given you the go signal. And then you push your product. We're done with the desirable practices. We might as well focus on some undesirable practices in the brokerage. Just to have the run through quickly. If you push your product too much, that is not very good on the part of the buyer. So you have to do it gently and you have to assess the needs. Next is sulot. This has been discussed, or the underground activity. You have to respect with your fellow practitioners, fellow brokers, fellow agents, whether from Filipino homes or from other brokerage firms. Respect is the key. You put if you put big markup, this has been practiced by some, no? They put a big markup, they jack up, they term it as jack up. If you put a big markup on the price of the property without informing the owner or the seller, and the moment the sale transaction is already there, the seller would later find out that you jack up the property, the price of the property as confided by the buyer. So it's a question anymore on your integrity. So that would create how do you call that, a bad image on your part. So as much as possible, you need to be transparent with your seller if you are jacking up on the price. They have to know, so that very consistent is the communication. And then next is the other undesired. You just allow yourself to be underpaid. There are cases that if they might abuse you. Some sellers would abuse that. Instead of giving 5%, they will just give you 2 or 3%. That's an abuse. You are a registered sales agent. You maintain your qualifications. We are required to have the CPD, or the professional development units. And then we are required to practice integrity, and then yet we are underpaid. So we have to honor our service. This is very critical. We have to honor, and as much as possible, assert our right that we be given 5%. Or else, sometimes if the property is it involves big amount, sometimes seller would tend to negotiate on our brokerage commission to 3%. Again and again, it would depend on your agreement. So, but as much as possible, assert your right not to be underpaid. Okay. Next, falsification of documents. Again, this is a no-no, and you're not disclosing it, the real status of your property to the buyer. This is no-no. Double sale. This has been sold already, and you're still selling the property. That's double sale. Selling or because some. Have you heard of double sale in Mactan? In Mactan, there are a lot of adverse claims. Why? There's a double sale. I do not know what must be the practice, the old practice in Mactan before, because I have heard a lot of properties wherein there are a lot of annotations for adverse claims because of double sale. Okay, so get rid of that. Then another thing, which is undesired, selling or marketing a property without an authority to sell. This is for our protection. We need to have an authority to sell, to have the consent from the owner. And then next is demand for a reservation fee or earnest money from the buyer without informing the seller. So you have to inform the seller if you are demanding for a reservation fee, because the money doesn't have to course through you. It has to be given directly to the seller. Unlike in some other practices, when there's a reservation, they will have an escrow, ESCREW, and that should usually be in a bank. You need to have an account. So the money, while the transaction is still ongoing, the money is being put in an escrow, ESCREW. So while the transaction is still ongoing, and others would also give the earnest money directly to the buyer if the buyer is present. And that is to, the presence of an escrow is to protect the integrity of the broker, that you don't have a hand on the money itself, because that doesn't have to go through you. It has to go through the buyer directly to the seller rather, not to you being the middleman. So or else the escrow will give the protection on the part of the seller and on the part of the buyer, the one giving the money. Okay. Escrow, ESCREW. That might be something new to some. The brokering of properties with other practitioners without informing the direct listing owner. As much as possible, if you're sharing your direct listings, or if you're sharing the listings which are not direct to you, at least inform the owner of the listing. That is to respect. So again, respect is the key. If that listing is not your direct, you have to inform the owner of that listing. Then another thing is serving or assisting buyers whose money is from illegal activities. Again, this is anti-money laundering. So as much as possible, we have to know the paying capacity of our buyers to encourage, because if you encourage money laundering, we might be an accomplice of the crime later on if you're encouraging money laundering. Okay. Next is, because there's already an anti-money laundering law. Okay. Another undesirable practice is you're pretending to be a buyer, yet you're just sourcing out good listings from your fellow practitioners. I experienced this. That's why you have to pre-screen your potential buyers, whether they're really direct buyers or they're referring agents. But if you're inquiring the property from a fellow practitioner, present yourself as a broker, as an agent. Don't pretend being a buyer, because you are just fooling around the one who is owning the listing or publishing the listing. So be honest. Okay, we have to finish up. Maybe this is just a run through. Some of these things are already mentioned a while ago. The Filipino Homes brand, the Boss Tonton mentioned this, that this has to be incorporated, but this is just a quick thing. When we create the brand, we really live out the brand. We really live out the values of Filipino Homes. The core values of Filipino Homes, because we are creating a brand as a company. We are creating a brand as a personal or as a practitioner, as an individual practitioner, and as a company as well. So Again, if you think of Filipino homes, people would really associate as tech-savvy people, right? Would you agree with me? Most of us, if not all of us, are tech-savvy because we are selling our properties online. So as much as possible, we have to be updated on the social media platforms. We have to be online, visible online, and so on and so forth. So, but it has to be with professionalism. Again and again, that's why there is the launching, or we have already have the academy, a proper training, not only the sales and marketing, but also professionalism, because our our company wants us to be fully equipped, not only professionally, but also when it comes to our core values, our practices. So professionalism and professional or career advancement. So if you talk about Filipino homes, we always have training. We always have ongoing training. We always have how do you call that? Trend when it comes to social media, other platforms. And just recently, we already have the FIRE, or the Filipino Homes Institute. Take note, it's an institute, okay? It's Filipino Homes Institute of Real Estate. So we really adhere to professionalism and career advancement. And that's credit to the father of Filipino Homes, our big bossing, Mr. Anthony Leuterio. Big bossing Tonton. And this is very important, integrity. Whenever you have your commission, you always have to declare it. Honesty is the best policy. That's an old saying, but we have to embrace it. We have to practice it. Integrity, very important, because you will never prosper without this value, integrity. Then team effort, I think this is very well practiced already in our company. Team effort or collaborative effort. We have different groups right away. We have different teams. We have different names of the teams. So that's team effort. We have resilience or sense of discipline. And nowadays, we are in a neo-normal, so it requires us to be resilient. We have to adapt new things. We have to be flexible. We have to be proactive if there are challenges that may come our way. So resilience is really the key here. We don't have to survive only, but we have to thrive, meaning we have to prosper. Thriving is prospering. We have to prosper. Then customer care, we service our clients with integrity, tech savvy. Social responsibility, before my presentation, we have seen a lot of the social responsibility projects of our company, outreach programs. I think you all know this. Our father, our big bossing is very, very active when it comes to social responsibility. Why? Because we're not only here to make money, we're also here to service or be of service to humanity. And that is in the form of outreach programs or social responsibility. And again, abundance mentality. Time check, we don't have the abundance of time. We don't have to pretend that we have so much time, but we have very limited time. I don't know if we can have the question and answer portion yet. May I know from the
Oh, we
admin?
can, yeah, boss, we can do it next part. We will be having a second part. So because they're so interested, but
Uh-huh.
our time is catching up with our
Yes, our,
seminar phase. So,
uh-oh. Yeah,
but it's
you are
okay.
right. You are right.
Yeah, we'll
And
just finish this one.
okay, thank you. Thank you for understanding, because there are technical glitches, plus my power and also my internet connection a while ago, which was also interrupted. So okay, I'm very much willing to entertain your questions later on, maybe some other time, some other schedule. I'm very much willing to be of help to you in my own little ways. So in here, I'm just incorporating the brand of Filipino Homes here, because wherever we go, whatever we do, we always have to carry with us the brand of Filipino Homes, the brand of integrity, the brand of professionalism, the brand of resilience, the brand of team effort, and the brand of customer care, and so on and so forth. Okay, so next, webinar takeaways. So I'm very sorry that we cannot accommodate your questions. Maybe you can just note down the things that you need to clarify with, because we are running short of time. So, and there were technical glitches along the way that can't be avoided. So here's my takeaway. In Tagalog, I know there are some who are Tagalog speaking here, especially from Luzon. It's pabaon. Oh, pabaon. I think that's a Tagalog also for takeaway. And for Bisaya, it's also pabaon, right? Okay. So it's pabaon, and I hope you can have this as a takeaway after my presentation. Because whenever you practice real estate or brokerage selling, it really spells prosperity. If you do it seriously, it spells prosperity. And remember, abundance is a birthright, meaning the moment we are born, we are already entitled to be abundant because it's a birthright. I don't know if you will agree with me, but me, I would always believe that abundance is a birthright. Prosperity is a choice. That's why I emphasize in the introduction, the trees, we plant trees because that will give us prosperity, maybe at 10 years or 20 years whatsoever. But if we plant people, that will create a lifetime of prosperity. If we care for people, if we deal with our clients, internal and external clients, and we have good people management, that means we are planting people. We are planting lifetime prosperity, and it's in our hands. It's a choice. Okay? And another thing, embrace abundance mentality. Nowadays, a lot of people are in crisis, be it financial crisis, emotional crisis. But at the end of the day, it's up to you whether you would allow yourself to be pulled down by circumstances, or you will choose to rise from the occasion. You will choose to be a cut above the rest. You will choose to be a victor. You will choose to be proactive instead of being reactive to the situation that we are in. So embrace that abundance mentality instead of scarcity mentality. And I hope you can radiate this to the people around you, to your family, to your fellow practitioners, to your boss, to the sellers, to your clients. Embrace that abundance mentality in you so that you will be a good example, and that will also be a blessing. You can be a blessing to others as well. Again, this is the law of karma that I have mentioned a while ago, that what you put in, it will always be given back to you. This is also a matter of your integrity, your integrity and honesty, the way you project yourself, the way you carry yourself, and the way you deal with others. If you have that trustworthiness, if you have that integrity, it will always be given back to you a hundredfold. And you create the good karma, because if you create a good karma will be given back to you. I would always believe in that. I hope you would agree with me. Okay? And the last, live a life full of thanks and giving. I emphasize this, live a life full of thanks and giving. We may not have a perfect life. We may not have perfect circumstances. We may not have perfect transactions, sales transactions whatsoever. There are a lot of challenges, especially nowadays that we are in the new normal. But don't forget to always recognize the blessings that you have instead of the things that are missing in your life. Recognize the blessings, not the things that are missing. Always be or live a life full of thanks and giving, and pay it forward. Share your blessings. Okay? So I'm very sorry that I cannot accommodate the questions anymore because you are running short of time. So happy selling, and be of service to the people around you. Okay? Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm giving my energy of love and support to all of you. Good day.
Wow,
Okay.
amazing. Okay, so Kids, from the bottom of our heart, from the team of Filipino Homes, we are so excited and we are so amazed with your informative and
Mhm.
comprehensive training about brokerage. And there are so many requests that we will be having part two. And yeah, I mean, if you can see the
Okay.
chat, my God, I mean, everybody are so happy with your discussion
Oh,
and with this
really?
detailed. Yeah, I already sent
Mhm.
you the chats, I mean the comments of all of the attendees, and they're so excited about our presentation. Your
That's
presentation
interesting.
was really detailed, and it is really perfect for all the new ones and also for the
Mhm.
old ones to refresh
Mhm.
the idea on how to really be professional dealing with brokerage. But I would like to end
Mhm.
with this for everybody. I have takeaways also with the presentation of both kids. Remember, number one, you need a team for the after sales service. And that's the reason why Kids Boligol was so successful. Boss Kids was so successful because she got a team. She got a team that will go to City Hall. She got a team that will facilitate in the RD. So you need a team. This is not a one-man show. This is a team effort. This is a network effort. Okay. And number two, forms are already in the portal. So if you go to Leuterio Realty, every forms that boss kids discuss are already there. That's almost there for 10 years. We prepared that so all of you, we don't have to miss all the information, the forms that you need to your buyers and to your sellers. The number three, protect both parties. It's very important. Both parties, the seller, the buyer, because we are here, the matchmaker. We call ourselves matchmaker. And if you are the perfect matchmaker, then you can hit the biggest deal in your life. Okay, what just like with Boss Kids Boligol, if you look at her commission, that's the reason she always go to Europe. Okay, going to Europe, minimum budget there is 1.5 to 2 million. Correct, kids? Is that yeah? You spend so much money. I've seen your presentation. I mean, I've seen your vacation, and your vacation. I already totaled that one just for one place, mga 600,000 to 800,000. I know Europe is very expensive. Then number four, due diligence is on top of your list. It's very important. Due diligence. That's the reason so many agents they don't know how to sell, and I told them that you have to attend this training, and if you have attended this training, and you will really understand brokerage. Then check property. Know the property that you're selling. There's so many agents, they always endorse property. Then when I say, have you checked the property? And there was one experience that we had, Boss Kids, diba? You even
Yes.
go to Bohol to check the property. You go to Surigao to check the property. You go to the property to check it for yourself. You cannot just rely having those property from your friend and selling it, giving it, endorsing it to Filipino Homes agent, and you never
Mhm.
even see it. Correct?
Correct.
It's very
Mhm.
important. So all of you have to see in your eyes the property. Don't sell that if you don't like it. Okay? Because you never know. You can have the documents from your friend, documents from your uncle, but they lie. They
Mhm.
lie telling you that this is a good property near the road, near the mall. But it's interior and there's no road right away. So you have to see and check the property. Then next is ATS is very important. Okay, Filipino homes need that. You need a consent from the seller that you are allowed to sell his property. You cannot sell a property without ATS. Some of the seller might be some bad sellers. Don't deal with them because imagine in the first place, if they cannot give ATS, they will not give commission to you. Believe me, I deal so many thousands of dealings of brokerage and so many victims, and most of the victims are agents because seller lies, seller get all these buyers direct from you, but they just shortcut from you. At the end of the day, mawala ka sa transaction. So you have to have ATS, protect yourself. And the only way the secret to get ATS is so simple. So sir, if you give me the property and if you don't give me ATS, sir, the problem, I might be terminated by Filipino Homes, because Filipino Homes' first requirement is the ATS, that I will allow this to post and market to all our network. So that's the secret to get ATS. Like me, somebody send me a property in Chaton, I'll give you ATS when there's a buyer. I told him, sir, I'm very sorry. With Filipino Homes, we are law abiding, and that is the priority of our company, that we are allowed. We cannot post your property. I cannot market your property without ATS. Okay. So next, number 7, brokerage is a full service transaction. You have to be in it. You have to swim. You have to really actually focus on that. You cannot just get the property and that just wait for a buyer. You cannot do that. It's a full service transaction. It's different from project selling. Project selling, staff will assist. You can just reserve like that. No, but this one, it's a tedious process. You have to really be detailed on transaction. And number 8, post all your properties in our website. It's a requirement. You will be terminated if you don't post your property in the website. So every time you post a property, it must be in the website. It's very important. Then 9, network is your network. Okay, remember that one. I had this saying way back 28 years ago. I always tell them, if you want to be rich in anything you do, it is about your network. And if you have the network, then that's your network. And just like Filipino Homes is the biggest network in real estate business. So we have the network, and that is your network. All you have to do is the best listing. And number 10, documentation is the king. So it documents. Don't share me a property. It's very important. You have to have documents. So thank you very much. Have a great lunch. Thank you to all Filipino Homes members. And most importantly, thank you, Boss Kets, for your valuable information. We really are so impressed with your presentation. I've been sitting here for almost 2 hours and 30 minutes, and I really love the presentation. And we will share this good news that you are really on top of the game of brokerage. Congratulations, our brokerage queen, Boss Kets Boligol. So if you have anything to say, you can put it in the chat room. So she will really sleep with your comments tonight. God bless you all. More power, and mabuhay ang Pilipino.